Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speak, Film, and Enter, a podcast where we review and rank movies. I'm Nate.
And I'm Dylan.
And today it is movie club number, is this 5?
Number 5.
I
Movie
think it's
club
number 5.
5. Mm-hmm.
And today we're talking about Malcolm X. So once a
Yes.
week, we pick an older movie that, generally speaking, we haven't seen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's available on streaming or to rent somewhere, and we talk about it. Just kind of a way to sort of inspire us or force us in some ways to watch some classic movies or some hidden gems or some cult favorites or whatever that we, for whatever reason, haven't gotten to yet. And Malcolm X was one of the first ones that came to mind for me, mostly because of its length is why I hadn't watched it yet. And I thought, we're doing this now. I'm going to force myself to watch Malcolm X. I like Spike Lee a lot, and who doesn't like Denzel Washington? So finally got to it. Dylan, would you like to tell the people what Malcolm X is about?
Absolutely. Biographical epic of the controversial and influential black nationalist leader from his early life and career as a small-time gangster to his ministry as a member of the Nation of Islam.
So yeah, I think it says right away to, didn't put up the big picture we got here. Malcolm X, that's who we're talking about. I should say that's the movie we're talking about. Yeah, it starts, I think they put up a title screen or whatever that tells us that this is based on the, why can't I find this thing that we always use? There it is. All right, we're back on track here. Couldn't proceed without the banner. Excuse me. That tells us this is based on the autobiography of Malcolm X. And you really feel that. You get some narration from Denzel Washington, and it's really, really long. Like we said before, 3 hours and 20 minutes.
Yep.
Which it seems like when this was made, making long sort of historical epics was very popular.
Yep.
I mean, with things like Gandhi won Best Picture, I believe. Just lots of really, really long movies, but I feel like we're kind of seeing it swing back in that direction this year with a lot of 2:45, 3 hour and 5 minute movies, some of which were even nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah, I was looking at the run times for all the nominees for Best Picture, and besides Women Talking, I believe they're all over 2 hours, and like some are like 2.5.
Yeah, I mean, in Avatar, Way of Water,
yeah,
The Fabelmans is really long. Didn't you watch this and The Fabelmans in the same day?
No, Fableman,
Okay.
then Malcolm X the next day.
Got
I
it.
could not, fit both in.
Yeah, because when you told me you might do that,
long.
Yeah. When you told me you might do that, I thought, I don't think you're going to be able to make it through, because I think you get like 6 hours between the two movies.
Yeah, no, I did not attempt it.
Yeah. So anyway,
but
back to Malcolm X.
Yeah, despite the length, I mean, I felt like it was handled pretty well. Like I never felt overwhelmed by how long it was or bored. And I think that's probably because in this one movie, it's kind of a few different types of movies for a little bit, and then it kind of switches. You know, in the beginning, it's kind of a gangster movie, and then it becomes almost a prison movie. And then, at the end, it becomes very overtly political and, a kind of a movie about race and American society. The whole thing is about that, but it really hones in on that in the last, hour and a half. But so in that regard, because it did change a lot, I didn't really feel the runtime very much. How about you?
I felt it a bit, but I generally agree with you that because it's kind of split up into 3 different parts, it doesn't feel as long as it could have for something that's over 3 hours. I do wish that we got more time with him when he was in prison, because that's kind of the, like they show him early in the movie and he gets involved with some organized crime. And that stuff's interesting. And really interesting, kind of like Delroy Lindo's in this movie, but like not for that long, but he's really important for when he is in it. Kind of. There are a lot of big name actors or faces that you'll recognize, that some who even show up for like 2 minutes, like Giancarlo Esposito is in
Yeah.
this movie for like 3 minutes, and it's a huge role.
Yeah.
I mean, like he plays the guy who shoots him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is also interesting too,
Oh,
because
and Bunk was in that car too.
was he?
Yeah, a very young I forget his name, but from The Wire. Yep.
Yeah, I didn't notice that. And then the guy that plays Toby, or played Toby in The West Wing, he
Mm-hmm.
shows up as like one of the reporters for a scene and has like 3 lines.
Yeah.
So just a lot of like early 90s faces.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to watch this movie now too, not that the whole thing is about it, but 2 of the 3 men who were sentenced and convicted for killing Malcolm X were exonerated a few years ago.
But no, pretty recent. Yeah, pretty recently though.
I want to say like 2020-ish.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they are the 2 guys who aren't played by Giancarlo Esposito, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was interesting, because they still hadn't happened yet when this movie came out, this movie came out 30 years ago
Mm-hmm.
at this
Mm-hmm.
point. But for me, I think, the success of this, Spike Lee's direction is really good. The movie looks really good. There are a lot of really interesting camera angles, and the color schemes and those kinds of things I think are really cool and really well done.
Yep.
But it's Denzel Washington. He is one of the best to ever do it. And he's playing one person here, but through so many different ups and downs and parts of his life, where it feels like he's playing different people. Like
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm X is so different after he's out of prison in this movie, and as we've read that he was in real life, to how
Mm-hmm.
he is in the first, I want to say like third
Yeah.
of
Like
the
yeah,
movie, like
over an
first
hour.
hour.
Mm-hmm.
They're just completely different people. And then you get the sort of transformational thing in prison with,
But I was gonna say,
I was going to say
but I
that,
agree with you that that transformational kind of era, I would have liked more of that. And I feel like in a movie this long, there could have been other places maybe that they could have shortened up to have it to give us a little more insight
yeah,
and just
that,
live in that part of his life for a little bit longer.
right. That was kind of my one big issue with it, was that for how long it is, to have his transformation feel a little rushed.
Mm-hmm.
It,
Mm-hmm.
like really, if this movie was like 2 hours and 20 minutes long, yeah, you've only got so much. I mean, you still only have so much time
Yeah.
in any movie. But if it was just kind of a normal, quote unquote, long movie length,
Mm-hmm.
I could forgive it a little bit more. But it's 3 hours and 20 minutes, and that really felt too quick. There's just like a scene or two where he kind of resists,
Yeah.
and then he has his mind changed, and then he has a big epiphany, and then all of a sudden he's different. And then when he's on the outside, we cut to, and he's like already, I mean, this already part of, he's a minister, he's
Mm-hmm.
part of the Nation of Islam, and he's handing out flyers on the street. And
Mm-hmm.
that to me was something that I would have liked to see more of. Like even his first time preaching, I think would have been interesting, or kind of meeting some of these people, getting that set up and kind of the grassroots groundwork,
Mm-hmm.
even though he was joining an established organization.
Mm-hmm.
That just felt fast to me, and it felt like some of that was cut off in favor of just kind of more speeches in the second half of the movie, which
Mm-hmm.
again, Denzel is phenomenal, and they're very captivating.
Yeah, and Spike Lee is really good at filming those sequences too.
Yes.
And I like how they kind of would go, it'd be one speech, but we'd see the first third of it in this location, and then the middle part of it in this location, and then we'd see the end of it in a different location. It was kind of a speech kind of montage, which I did.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the way he was doing that, but then he does that a couple times, and I agree with you that I felt like there was, we see a lot of speeches in the second half.
Yeah.
I feel like we could have cut a few to just explore other things that was going on with him.
Yeah, and I just do think that that's where you and I have talked about this before. Where I'm not a huge fan of biopics, the kind of like the beginning to end. I tend to
Mm-hmm.
prefer stuff like Spencer, or like, I mean, One Night in Miami is fictionalized, so that's not maybe a great example, but just things that kind of pick a small moment
Yes. I
or
think
like
that's
a
the modern way of doing it, I feel like.
I think it is too.
Mhm.
And I find that more interesting because I think they tend to focus a little more on the character rather than trying to like recreate these big public moments that people are expecting to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, like it's not like the execution with what Spike Lee is doing here is poor.
No.
It's just kind of a preferential thing for me where I prefer to get more like intimate details and
Mhm.
explore the character a little more rather than making sure we kind of check the boxes of the big moments. But yeah, I mean, I still really enjoyed this. And despite its length, I totally agree with you that the way it's structured, it doesn't feel as long as it actually is.
Mhm. Yeah, no, really well done, and I agree. I think that going into this, just the elements that were involved, early '90s, epic, chronological biopic,
Yep.
like there were things that are working against it, and I think there are a lot of movies like that that I really you know don't enjoy or wouldn't have enjoyed as much. But the combination of Spike Lee's directing, the structure, and then Denzel just crushing it in the title role, I think, like you said. I thought this was really great. I had a really great time. I think we can get to the stars.
All right. We'll be right back with our star ratings.
All right. I'll go first. I'm giving this a solid 4 stars. I think this is a great movie. I never really felt the runtime. Really good supporting cast, huge cast. I thought it was interesting how it kind of moved through different eras because I guess I didn't realize that his youth was really like that far back. Like
Yeah.
post-war because he's like an adult in like the '60s. So it's like, oh, okay, yeah. But just when it started and it was like, oh man, like I hadn't grasped that that conception of time. I also watching this movie definitely led me down a big rabbit hole on the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and like the Nation of Islam and just like that
Yep.
whole because I had totally misunderstood like that organization. Like I thought they were more like based in the Middle East, and but instead
Oh,
I like
sure.
they're just an American organization. Like the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was like born in Georgia. Like I didn't even but during the movie when he's talking and he kind of is throwing like Southern slang onto some stuff, like a Southern accent, I was just like, what is like I gotta know what the story with this guy is. And
Yeah.
I thought the guy who portrayed him was really, really good. He was one of the more dynamic like characters. I felt like who played, yeah, Al Freeman Jr. Just very, very unique and kind of subdued, but you can tell he has a
Hmm.
lot of power and just his position. And I thought it was just really interesting. I felt like they had a cool, or not, not a cool, but like a very intriguing, well done period piece gangster movie, and then they had a pretty well done prison movie, but obviously could have been longer. But then like the twists and turns of the politics with the Nation of Islam and public perception and his interviews and some of his statements, and like there was a lot of that second half was full of a lot of intriguing things that really kept me pretty much glued to the screen like down the back stretch of the movie. So I really liked it, and yeah, so I'm gonna give it 4 stars, maybe 4.5. And I wouldn't be against rewatching it someday, maybe with someone who hadn't seen it or something.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, over to you.
Yeah. I like your point on some of the historical stuff because I've seen some of his speeches
Mm-hmm.
and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. We never learned about that in school, and I've
Nope.
done less digging since then than I should have and that I've meant to.
Mm-hmm.
And that part was really fascinating historically. I mean, this felt pretty. I mean, I've done some reading on like how accurate this movie is, and it feels like he tried to stay very true
Mm-hmm.
uh, to his autobiography. And I'm sure there are some fabrications or rearranging of things here and there, but I thought that all worked really well. So I'm giving this a 3.5. I basically agree with you on pretty much everything. I just think the condensed feeling of the prison sequence bothered me more than it bothered you.
Mm-hmm.
I think the last like half hour of this is breathtaking and thrilling and
Yeah.
just incredibly well done. I think this has one of the best. dance sequences I've ever seen in a movie, which is something I was not
Yeah.
expecting for Malcolm X. And
Hmm.
it is the same song, if anybody has seen A League of Their Own, it's the same song in the bar that Madonna is dancing to.
Really?
Yeah.
I
Which
did
is
not
now
know that.
apparently, and which is also like one of my favorite dance scenes ever from a movie. So maybe that's just my favorite song.
Yeah, I also noticed that those last 30 minutes that we're talking about, there's kind of a montage with the Sam Cooke song "Change Gonna Come," which is also
Hmm.
a tie-in to One Night in Miami because Sam
It
Cooke was
is.
a character, and that song was almost like he was doing that like for Malco. So that was an interesting tie-in too.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, once you start watching more movies like we are and from different eras where you just kind of see these things that tie into each other.
Hmm.
So I did really like this. I just the combination of that the prison part beat feeling too short with how
Hmm.
long the movie actually is, I think just bugged me a little more than it bugged you. But I would definitely recommend this to pretty much everybody.
All right. All right. So on to the spoiler discussion.
Well, first, actually, we should get to next week's movie club pick, which
Oh,
will
yep.
be
Movie Club
week
number
6,
6.
and we'll be leading right into Valentine's Day weekend. So, with that in mind, we are going to be watching Roman Holiday
Oh, yeah.
from, I want to say, I had it up and then I went to the Malcolm X page. So, forgive me.
1954?
53? 1953, starring Audrey Hepburn and Gregory Peck.
Mm,
Uh,
classic.
Classic rom-com where Audrey Hepburn plays a princess who's just kind of done with that life and she wants to experience the real world for a day. She sneaks out while visiting Rome,
Hmm.
meets Gregory Peck's character, and they spend a day doing things in Rome that she's never gotten to do before because she's always locked up in castles and giving
Oh,
speeches and has her whole day scheduled. And
tough life.
yes, but I have watched it already. So,
Okay.
I think it was the first
I've
time I
not.
actually watched it kind of like significantly ahead of time.
Okay.
But that's what we'll be getting to next week if anybody wants to check that out.
Hmm.
It is, I don't think it's streaming anywhere at the moment. Just let me look that up really quickly. It's on Paramount Plus. Otherwise, you got to rent it.
Okay.
So that's what we'll be getting to next week. And then now it is time to jump into the spoiler discussion of Malcolm X. Since it's a 30-year-old movie, we can talk about this.
Hmm.
We don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen it, but at the same time, it's 30 years old, so we can do a spoiler discussion here. I
Hmm.
felt like I had one thing right away that I wanted to dive into with the spoiler discussion. And now, after introducing or talking about Roman Holiday for about 30 seconds, I've kind of spaced. So, what do you got?
Oh, geez. Well, let's see. The dance scene was great.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. I thought that was a great way to kick off just kind of the whole movie with a lot of energy, and kind of it shows that like, we're willing, like the movie's willing to, it's trying to entertain you like at the same time as
Mhm.
inform you. And I thought that was interesting. And then I mean, yeah, just the stuff with Delroy Lindo and like just kind of the gangster part of it, and what they're talking about, you need a rep, everyone needs a rep. I thought that
Yeah.
was really interesting. um just his whole look, like with the slick back hair and kind of the extravagant suits was interesting, and
Yeah.
transition to more like refined suits, like it was just a very kind of colorful way, and just the period piece part of it in general like really sucked me in right away.
Yeah. That kind of made me want to see Spike Lee do something that's just like purely from that era, the entire movie.
Hmm.
Which maybe
Hmm.
he has. I haven't seen all of his movies, but
And he
if it's
was
out
pretty
there,
good in it too.
someone tell me, and I will
Yep.
go check it out.
Yeah, he was
Yeah,
pretty
that
good in it too. I know he likes to appear in all of his movies, but
he
as
was.
Shorty, a
Yeah, I did feel like his character just kind of disappeared.
little bit.
They have that little moment where they see each other again when Malcolm is speaking,
Hmm.
but then that's kind of it. I don't think we ever see him again, and that
I don't think so either.
bothered me a little bit.
Hmm.
But I wanted to get into too how well executed I thought the stuff in the prison was.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just wanted more of
Hmm.
that part of it where it definitely made me think of Born on the 4th of July.
Ooh, okay, yeah.
where this big sort of philosophical transformation that a character has, and it's definitely different where Tom Cruise's character in that movie goes like has to do a 180
Hmm.
on what he believes and how he views the world, and where Malcolm X's character here is more like a, a wake up call and looking at things in a different direction and just taking things more seriously.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it just made me think about how it takes like 2 hours in Born on the 4th of July for Tom Cruise's character to change his damn mind.
Yeah, yeah.
And in here, it happens in like 15 minutes.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I think it's fair criticism.
So
Um,
it's hard too because it's like everything individually on camera is good.
yeah, the
The,
stuff when he's in isolation, I thought that was very
that
well
was
done.
really good. And then like Albert Hall, who played Baines, who I'm
Yeah,
gonna
he was
pull.
really that first scene when he first starts to try to sell him on it is really good.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull a little bit of an Adam here, where the only other thing that I think I had seen him in was Rookie of the Year,
Oh, geez.
just
Okay.
because. Yeah, and it took me a while. I was like, I've seen that guy in something before, and I was like, oh god, I'm one of those people that like just remembers this very accomplished actor who's been in very serious movies for just like this kids movie that he made when I was 5. But he was also in Apocalypse Now, which I just watched recently as well.
Albert
And
Hall was in
in
Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, I think he might
Oh.
have been the driver or like the sergeant or whatever on the boat. Could be
Okay.
wrong. He might have just been a background guy somewhere too. He was also in National Treasure 2, which is kind of amusing. But he was really good. And that stuff I found fascinating too with the Nation of Islam and kind of it was one of those things that I had heard about before where like he split
Yeah.
from the nation, but I'd kind of forgotten and didn't really know a lot about. This whole movie basically just makes me want to like actually read his autobiography, which I
Yeah.
really should do.
Hmm.
But I thought that was really fascinating, especially because as I was watching it, there would be certain moments where I'd feel like I don't really know how I feel about like what the Nation of Islam is doing to him, or like how they what they said here, or the fact that like they have a problem with him speak, or they're presented in this way, and I had kind of spaced on the fact that he split from them eventually. But
Hmm.
then like right when I was starting to kind of think like then yeah, it showed up like almost the next scene where he's talking to his wife, I think, and it's just like, I don't know, maybe these guys aren't for me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that was really interesting. I definitely didn't know the details of that. And I didn't know kind of the timeline with them kind of bringing the hammer down on him, and so then he takes the pilgrimage, and then the pilgrimage kind of changes some of his views and
Hmm.
kind of cements that he's like, okay, I'm not going to roll with you guys anymore. Um, and
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting compared to, because I also definitely got like some kind of classic epic American movie vibes where you expect like the tragedy, if it's going to end in tragedy, it's usually like a flaw of our main character that they like haven't addressed, and they
Yep.
keep not addressing it, and then they lose everything. Like even a lot of biopics, that's how they're kind of structured, right? Dealing with, whatever addiction or criminal problems or whatever it might be.
They just
And in this,
changed too late is
they
kind of
changed
how it. Yeah.
yeah, they changed too late. Whereas this one, it kind of flips that a little bit, which of course is just based on what really happened. It's not really a story choice, but interesting how it was like when he when he decided to change his views, like people were hating on him because his views were too extreme or were too this or too that, and then he decides to change his views for a more kind of open-minded, kind of accepting way, and that was like what signed his death warrant, where they were like, that's why he was killed. Like
Yeah,
I just think that's like, I don't know, it's just fascinating. It's just a really fascinating story.
yeah, for sure. It's always interesting to see with something like this where like, yeah, you're telling a true story based on one guy's life, but you still need to structure it in a way that, like you kind of said before, like entertains and
Hmm.
holds people's attention, and it needs to kind of fit the highs and lows and what you
Yep.
generally expect to get from a movie. And it definitely had that feel of, okay, he's because yeah, like you said, it isn't like exactly why it happened or whatever, but it's kind
Mhm.
of, we see some of these speeches and like even in prison where they talk about the white man being the devil, and he says some of that stuff in speeches, and then sometimes when he's being interviewed, he sort of gives like non-answers on those specific type things. Sometimes he
Mhm.
doesn't. It's sort of back and forth on like on camera, like just how far he's willing to go down
Yes.
that path. And then we get interesting cuts with like other leaders of the civil rights movement, with Martin Luther King and other
Mhm.
men and women who he had disagreements with on, like you said, like how extreme he was and was viewed.
Mhm.
And then this was actually a transformation that I felt like was done in a more believable way with his
Yeah.
split from the Nation of Islam. That felt, from a story perspective, more earned
Mhm.
to me than his transformation in prison.
Mhm.
Which, and so Spike Lee does it in an effective way where it just enhances the tragedy, even, but at the same time, it does. It's interesting just to feel a little bit like, now that he says he's accepting of like white people,
Mhm.
then he dies,
Mhm.
which, to your point, it's a complicated way to look at it. And
Yeah.
it's hard to look at this stuff and completely just view it as how was it executed in the movie versus how it happened in real life.
Yeah.
Because there are movies that I mean, did this get a Best Picture nomination? I don't think it did.
Did Denzel get a nomination for his performance? I'm sure.
Probably. Best
Um.
actor and best costume design, and that was it.
Oh wow. Okay.
So
Um.
it kind of reminded me a little bit in that sense, as far as like with awards voting and kind of how like quote unquote white America is going to receive this movie.
Mhm.
A few years ago, If Beale Street Could Talk,
Yeah.
uh, Barry Jenkins adapted a novel by James Baldwin, and there's a character in that movie who talks about how white people are the devil.
Mhm.
And that did not get a Best Picture nomination, and it kind of shocked a lot of people. And I always felt like that line and that scene is the reason why that movie didn't get a Best Picture nomination.
Interesting.
And that's kind of why I feel like this one may not have as well either. But that's why I find it
Mhm.
interesting the way that it, at the end of the movie, he is more opening, and like we said, that's like real life. It's real things that he said, but
Yeah.
it's just such a fascinating way, and obviously tragic
Mhm.
way, that it all goes down. And it is a lot of that extremism that, or viewed by many as extremism, that
Mhm.
made people more receptive to people like Martin Luther King and led to the Civil Rights Act.
Yeah,
So
this movie made me realize that like the perception of Malcolm X that I feel like we are taught in school is
yes.
definitely not accurate because
Hmm.
he's definitely portrayed as the more radical, like violent, like kind of like militant leader as opposed to Martin Luther King, who's always peaceful. But this movie makes a great point of illustrating like Malcolm never like hurt anyone. Like he wasn't violent. He didn't like lead violent marches or like he lived a very peaceful life. He lived the word that he preached. Like
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it definitely, growing up and just the way we're taught about him. I don't even know. I can't even remember learning about him really,
not other
other
than
than
not, I mean not really like a paragraph right before the book would get into Martin Luther King.
just kind of getting the impression that he was like the quote unquote dangerous one.
Yeah, and that
You know
like
what I mean?
he was a little too he was a little too like abrasive or viewed as possibly dangerous. So that's what kind of was his downfall.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and yeah, definitely something people need two more white guys on YouTube discussing.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, go look it up. Like I said, I went down a whole Wikipedia rabbit hole reading about it after I watched the movie last night. So it's really crazy. Other things from the movie specifically, like it turns into a little bit, I wouldn't say a romance, but there's a love story here at the in the end, in the final part of the movie
Yeah,
with.
that I don't feel like because it's Angela Bassett, right?
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
was trying to find her name, but she's not listed here in the top. Oh, there she is. Yeah, never mind.
I don't feel like that character was really given much, and their whole like, I mean, they meet and you can tell that they might kind of hit things off, and then all of a sudden they're married, and then they have this life together that she's kind of in the middle of and getting frustrated with the Nation of Islam and everything, and they have those discussions. That felt a little fast as
Mm,
well. It didn't feel to me outside of like a scene or two that Angela Bassett was given as much to do as I would have liked.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's
But
fair.
I mean, she's really good. She's always really good, and she's also nominated for Best Supporting Actress this year, which it sounds like she's got a very good chance at winning.
Oh, for what?
Black Panther, Wakanda Forever.
Oh, interesting. I did
Yeah,
not, yeah, I didn't know that. I got to look
hmm
through all the nominations. I've been
yeah.
stuck on the picture ones.
But I don't know. I mean, I don't have too much else really to say about this movie, just because so much of it is just kind of going through what
What
happened.
happened? I mean, yeah, I think, we have a spoiler section for all of our movie club reviews, but I think
Yeah,
this is the first time that we've done a historically accurate
right.
biopic. So, there's no really discussion as far as like, well, why'd the story go this way when I wanted it to go that way? Really, all we can kind of nitpick or discuss is what it chose to show of his life or how much versus other things, which I feel like we've already touched on what we
Yeah,
want to
you can
see
go
more of.
read a lot of this stuff. You can go read the book, which I very well might do. I keep meaning to, and maybe I'll
Yeah.
finally read that now.
All right. But yeah, no, kudos to Spike Lee. I thought his style, his signature style was there, and it was he was a lot of kind of unexpected, like a swooping camera shot here or using a certain technique here. Like I feel like in all of Spike Lee's movies, there's like one or two moments that like just the way it's shot, you're like, "Oh, this is a Spike Lee movie." Like
Yeah,
it's a
it
signature
felt a
thing,
little more held back
a little more tame than
than
some
some
of
of
his
his
other
other
stuff.
stuff.
I like at the end of the dancing scene how he's the one who runs up and slides between the lady's legs for
Oh,
like the
that was
next,
great.
like yeah, like I've
I was
never
like,
thought of him as a very athletic guy, but
mhm.
he went for it, man. He's like, I
Yeah, I was
want to
like,
be the guy.
I
I'm
see you,
sliding
Spike
through her
Lee.
legs.
Yeah, just living
Yeah,
out a weird little dream of his, and I think it's totally fine.
and the stuff with the hair gel too, the burning, that was a good comic gag that they got for
Hmm.
2 for 1 comic gag with that.
Yeah,
um, yeah, that was fantastic. All right, so 4 stars from me, 3.5 from you. That is Malcolm X. Again, what is our movie club number 6 for next week, Nate?
that is Roman Holiday from 1953.
Mm-hmm. All right, and I believe it's my turn to put a wrap on the show.
It is.
All right. West Indian Archie might have been a mathematical genius, but we were all victims of the American social order.